The morning sun stretched lazily across the glass facade of the Meridian Tower, a 17-story residential building that stood like a sentinel on the corner of Ashford Street and 3rd Avenue. It was one of those rare September mornings when the air held just enough coolness to remind the city that summer was finally loosening its grip, yet retained enough warmth to make the concrete sidewalks glow with a honey-colored luminescence. The light played tricks on the building's exterior, transforming each window into a mirror that reflected fragments of clouds drifting peacefully across an impossibly blue sky. At ground level, the entrance to the Meridian was framed by 2 precisely trimmed boxwood hedges, their leaves so dark green they appeared almost black in the shadows. Between them, a pathway of smooth gray pavers led to the double glass doors, which were tinted just enough to offer privacy while still allowing passers-by to glimpse the modern lobby within. Above the entrance, 3 security cameras hung like silent guardians, their dark lenses sweeping slowly from left to right in a choreographed dance of surveillance that had become so commonplace in urban architecture that most people no longer even noticed them. The street itself hummed with the ordinary symphony of city life. A coffee shop 2 doors down sent wisps of espresso-scented steam curling into the air, mixing with the faint smell of fresh bread from the bakery across the street. An elderly woman in a violet cardigan walked a small terrier, stopping every few feet as the dog investigated invisible mysteries on the sidewalk. 2 joggers passed in synchronized rhythm, their breathing steady, their footfalls creating a soft percussion against the pavement. A delivery truck idled at the corner, its driver checking a tablet while morning traffic flowed around him with surprising patience. Near the building's entrance, a young mother pushed a stroller, pausing to adjust the sunshade that protected her sleeping infant from the strengthening light. She smiled at a man watering the small garden bed that bordered the building's foundation, where late-blooming petunias still clung stubbornly to summer, their purple and white petals bright against the dark soil. The water from his hose caught the sunlight, creating tiny rainbows that lasted only seconds before dissolving back into the ordinary world. Inside the lobby, visible through those tinted doors, a security guard named Marcus sat at his desk, his eyes occasionally lifting from his paperwork to scan the monitors that showed different angles of the street outside. The screens glowed with a bluish light, displaying the peaceful morning routine in multiple perspectives. He took a sip from his oversized mug, the coffee still hot enough to require careful navigation, and returned his attention to an incident report from the previous evening. Nothing serious, just a food delivery to the wrong apartment. Everything existed in a state of perfect, unremarkable normalcy. This was a Tuesday morning like countless others, in a neighborhood where people went about their lives with the comfortable assumption that the day would unfold exactly as expected. The sounds were familiar: distant traffic, the occasional car horn, the rhythmic beeping of a truck backing up somewhere down the block, the murmur of conversation from people passing by. Even the light seemed designed for comfort, neither too harsh nor too dim, casting soft shadows that suggested depth without darkness. A rideshare vehicle, identifiable by the small illuminated sign in its windshield, pulled up to the curb approximately 20 feet from the Meridian's entrance. The car was a silver sedan, relatively new, its paint job reflecting the morning sun with mirror-like precision. The driver, a man in his mid-40s with graying temples and wearing wraparound sunglasses despite the moderate light, kept his engine running. He reached for his phone mounted on the dashboard, tapping the screen with quick, impatient movements, his lips pressed into a thin line of concentration. The moment held its breath, balanced perfectly between what had been and what was about to unfold. The city continued its morning routine, unaware that within seconds, this ordinary Tuesday on this ordinary street corner would transform into something that would ripple far beyond the physical boundaries of Ashford and 3rd, captured frame by those silent cameras above, waiting to reveal a truth that human eyes might miss but digital memory would preserve forever. Would you like to make any changes, or should I proceed to block 2? The rear passenger door of the silver sedan opened with a metallic click that seemed louder than it should have been, cutting through the ambient morning sounds with unexpected sharpness. From inside the vehicle, a hand emerged first, weathered, with prominent knuckles and skin that spoke of decades of work and sun exposure. The hand gripped the door frame with careful deliberation, fingers white with the effort of supporting weight that the legs could no longer fully bear alone. Then came the man himself. He was perhaps in his late 50s, though hardship had a way of adding years to a face that might have once looked younger. His hair, more salt than pepper, was neatly combed back, and he wore a pressed button-down shirt in pale blue, tucked into dark slacks that had been carefully ironed, the crease down each leg sharp and intentional. This was a man who took pride in his appearance, who refused to let his circumstances diminish his dignity. His name was Robert Chin, though the driver had never bothered to ask. Robert's right leg emerged from the car first, the foot encased in a worn but polished black shoe. The movement was slow, calculated, each muscle working in concert to accomplish what able-bodied people achieved without thought. His left leg followed, but differently, the movement mechanical, lacking the organic fluidity of natural motion. The prosthetic limb, visible for just a moment as his pant leg rode up slightly, was a testament to some previous chapter of his life, some accident or illness that had claimed part of him but not his determination to continue. He planted his cane on the sidewalk, a simple aluminum cane with a rubber tip, nothing fancy, just functional. The sound it made, a soft tap against concrete, was gentle, almost apologetic. Robert began the process of extracting himself from the vehicle, using the cane for leverage, his breathing measured but audible with the effort. His face remained composed, focused entirely on the physical puzzle of standing, of transferring his weight from the car seat to his own 2 feet. One flesh, one metal and plastic. "Come on, man. I don't have all day." The driver's voice cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. It was the first time he had spoken since pulling up to the curb, and the words carried an edge of irritation that seemed wildly disproportionate to the situation. He twisted in his seat, looking back at Robert with an expression that mixed impatience with something darker, something that resembled contempt. Robert didn't respond immediately. He was still focused on standing, on achieving vertical stability before attempting the next challenge, retrieving his small backpack from the seat beside where he'd been sitting. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the physical exertion, from the way his muscles had to compensate for the imbalance in his gait. "Did you hear me? I said I don't have all day. I got other rides waiting." The driver's voice had risen in volume, and now people on the sidewalk were beginning to notice. The woman with the stroller glanced over, her expression shifting from pleasant morning reverie to concern. The man watering the flowers paused, the stream from his hose faltering. "I'm sorry," Robert said quietly, his accent carrying the faint traces of somewhere else, some other country he'd called home before this one. "Just one moment, please. I need to get my bag." His voice was gentle, almost deferential, as if apologizing for the simple fact of his existence, for the body that refused to move at the speed that modern life demanded. But the driver was already moving. He threw his car into park with more force than necessary, the transmission making a grinding protest. He pushed open his door and stepped out onto the street, slamming it behind him with a violence that made several pedestrians stop and stare. He was a thick man, not tall but broad, with the kind of build that suggested he spent time in a gym not for health but for intimidation. His jaw was set, his sunglasses hiding eyes that Robert might have been grateful not to see. "You know what?" the driver said, rounding the car with heavy footfalls. "Forget it. Get your stuff and get out. I'm canceling this ride." Robert's hand, which had been reaching into the car for his backpack, froze. "But I already paid. I need to get to the medical center. My appointment." "I don't care about your appointment." The driver was at the rear passenger door now, close enough that Robert had to lean back slightly. "You should have told me you were disabled when you ordered the ride. I would have never accepted it. You people take forever." The words hung in the air like poison. "You people." 2 words that carried the weight of 1,000 assumptions, a lifetime of being reduced to a limitation rather than seen as a person. Robert's face, which had maintained its composed dignity throughout the struggle to exit the vehicle, now registered something else. A flicker of pain that had nothing to do with his missing leg and everything to do with his diminished humanity in this man's eyes. "Please," Robert said, and the word cracked slightly, betraying emotion he was trying desperately to contain. "I have to get there. It's for physical therapy. I can't miss." "Not my problem." The driver reached past Robert and grabbed the small backpack, yanking it from the seat with such force that the zipper partially opened, and a pill bottle tumbled out onto the sidewalk, rolling toward the gutter. "Here's your stuff. Ride's over. I'm reporting you for taking too long to get in." Robert stared at the pill bottle as it settled against the curb, his medication for the phantom pain that still haunted the leg that no longer existed. His shoulders, which had been held so carefully straight, began to sag. His grip on the cane tightened until his knuckles went white, but not from anger, from the effort of remaining standing while his world tilted on its axis. The driver was already walking back to his door, pulling out his phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. Probably giving Robert a 1-star rating, probably typing out some complaint that would make him the victim in this scenario, probably already composing the narrative that would justify what he'd just done. And Robert stood there on the sidewalk outside the Meridian Tower, his backpack now on the ground beside him, his medication rolling slowly toward the street drain, his appointment time ticking closer while his means of getting there evaporated before his eyes. The morning sun that had seemed so warm and welcoming minutes before now felt harsh, exposing, as if highlighting his vulnerability for everyone passing by to see. The morning sounds continued around Robert as if nothing had changed. The coffee shop still released its aromatic steam into the air. The distant traffic still hummed its urban symphony. A bird somewhere in the ornamental tree planted at the corner still sang its territorial declaration. But for Robert, standing alone on that sidewalk with his cane planted firmly to keep himself upright, the world had narrowed to a tunnel of shame and helplessness that made every sound seem distant and muted, as if he were underwater. He bent slowly, the movement requiring the kind of calculation that most people never had to consider. His weight shifted entirely to his right leg, the real one, while his left, the prosthetic, served mainly as a balance point. The cane remained locked in his right hand, a third point of contact with the earth that kept him from toppling as he lowered himself enough to reach for the backpack. His lower back protested with a sharp twinge that he'd grown accustomed to over the years, the kind of pain that comes from a body compensating for asymmetry, from muscles working overtime to achieve what had once been effortless. The pill bottle had rolled just beyond his immediate reach, settling against the metal grate of a storm drain. Robert stared at it for a long moment, calculating whether he could safely retrieve it without losing his balance entirely. Behind him, the silver sedan's engine revved. The driver was still there, still in his vehicle, probably watching in his rearview mirror, waiting for Robert to clear the area completely before driving away. People walked past. This was the part that hurt in ways that had nothing to do with his missing leg or his aching back. A young man in a business suit, tie perfectly knotted, briefcase swinging at his side, glanced at Robert, registered the scene, the backpack on the ground, the cane, the awkward bent position, and his eyes flickered with something that might have been pity or discomfort. But he didn't stop. His stride didn't even break rhythm. He simply looked away and continued toward wherever his morning was taking him, toward a destination he would reach on time, without incident, without humiliation. Two college-aged women approached from the other direction, both absorbed in their phones, thumbs scrolling through feeds of curated lives and filtered realities. One of them nearly collided with Robert, so focused was she on her screen. She pulled up short with a small gasp, her eyes meeting his for the briefest fraction of a second. "Sorry," she mumbled, but the word was reflexive, automatic, devoid of real awareness. She and her friend curved around him like water flowing around a stone, their conversation resuming before they'd even fully passed, something about someone named Jessica and what she'd posted last night. The woman with the stroller, who had noticed the confrontation, had turned away. She was now facing the other direction, making an elaborate show of adjusting her baby's blanket, checking a diaper bag, doing anything to justify why she wasn't looking at the man who clearly needed help. Perhaps she was uncomfortable with confrontation. Perhaps she had her own problems, her own schedule to keep. Perhaps she simply didn't want to become involved in something that wasn't her business. Whatever her reasons, she had made herself blind to Robert's struggle. Even the man who had been watering the flowers had retreated. The hose now lay on the ground, water still running but no longer directed anywhere purposeful, creating a small puddle that spread across the sidewalk. He had disappeared back into the building, perhaps to report what he'd witnessed, perhaps to distance himself from a situation that made him uncomfortable, perhaps to simply continue with his day as if he hadn't seen a thing. Robert finally managed to grasp his backpack, pulling it toward him with a grunt of effort. He straightened slowly, vertebra by vertebra, his breath coming in measured pulls. The pill bottle would have to wait. He didn't have the energy, the balance, or the dignity left to attempt that particular retrieval. He watched it there against the drain, the white plastic container with its orange prescription label, and felt a weight settle over him that was heavier than any physical burden. Inside his chest, behind the pressed pale blue shirt that he'd ironed so carefully that morning, his heart hammered with an emotion that was part anger, part humiliation, part resignation. This wasn't the first time someone had treated him as an inconvenience rather than a person. It wouldn't be the last. He knew this with the certainty that comes from lived experience, from 1,000 small cuts that never quite healed before the next one opened. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Knowing didn't fill the hollow space that opened up inside him each time he was reminded that his body's limitations made him less valuable in the eyes of others. He thought about his appointment, now surely lost. The physical therapist who would mark him as a no-show. The rescheduling that would push his next session weeks into the future because her schedule was always full. The progress he'd been making, the small victories of increased mobility and decreased pain, now interrupted by this morning's cruelty. He thought about his daughter, who would call tonight as she always did on Tuesdays, who would ask how therapy went, and how he would have to explain what happened, hearing the anger in her voice on his behalf, an anger he could no longer muster for himself. The silver sedan's engine note changed. Robert turned his head slightly, watching from his peripheral vision as the driver finally put the car in gear. There was no apology, no final glance of remorse. The vehicle simply pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic with aggressive speed, leaving Robert standing there as if he had been nothing more than an obstacle successfully removed from the driver's path. The space where the car had been was now empty except for a small oil stain on the pavement and the faint smell of exhaust. Robert stood in that emptiness, feeling it echo the emptiness inside him. Around him, the city continued its Tuesday morning. People continued walking to destinations they would reach. Cars continued flowing down the street toward places they needed to be. The sun continued climbing higher, indifferent to human suffering, warming the pavement and the buildings and the faces of people who didn't have to think about how many steps it would take to reach the bus stop, or whether they had the strength left to attempt that journey. And in that moment, Robert Chin felt more alone than he had since the day he'd woken up in a hospital bed and realized that part of him was gone forever, that the world he'd known had transformed into a place where every curb was a mountain, every staircase a challenge, and every impatient stranger a reminder that his pace, his needs, his very existence was somehow wrong. He took a breath, then another. He adjusted his grip on his cane. He looked down the street toward where the bus stop stood, 3 blocks away. 3 blocks that might as well have been 3 miles. And he prepared to walk. Stop for a moment. Put down whatever you're doing. Look at your legs. Move them. Stand up. Sit down. Walk to the kitchen. Do it without thinking, without planning each movement, without wondering if you'll make it there before your body gives out. That's your privilege. That's what Robert Chin no longer has. And this morning, on a sidewalk that could be in your city, in your neighborhood, on your street, someone decided that his lack of that privilege made him disposable. Think about the last time you ordered a rideshare. You tapped an app, a car appeared, you got in, you arrived. Simple. Effortless. The entire transaction probably took less mental energy than deciding what to have for breakfast. You didn't have to worry about whether the driver would look at you with disgust. You didn't have to apologize for the body you inhabit. You didn't have to fear that your simple need to get from point A to point B would be treated as an unreasonable imposition. Robert paid for that ride just like you pay for yours. He entered his destination just like you enter yours. He waited for his pickup just like you wait for yours. But somewhere between the promise of service and the reality of delivery, his humanity got lost in translation. Because he moved slower. Because his body required an extra 30 seconds to exit a vehicle. Because the architecture of his flesh and bone didn't meet someone's arbitrary standard of efficiency. Let that sink in. 30 seconds. That's how long it takes to send a text message. That's how long you spend deciding which song to play next. That's the commercial break you fast forward through without a second thought. 30 seconds was apparently too much of Robert's existence for another human being to tolerate. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold. You walked past this scene. Maybe not this exact scene, maybe not Robert specifically, but you've walked past something like it. We all have. We've all seen someone struggling and convinced ourselves it wasn't our problem. We've all witnessed injustice and told ourselves we were too busy, too late, too uncomfortable to intervene. We've all participated in the collective decision that some people's dignity is optional, that some people's struggles are background noise to our important days. The woman with the stroller turned away. The man watering the flowers disappeared. The pedestrians flowed around Robert like he was street furniture, something to navigate around rather than someone to acknowledge. And in their silence, in their averted eyes, in their careful choreography of not seeing, they became complicit. Not villains perhaps, but not heroes either. Just people who chose comfort over courage, convenience over compassion. You might be thinking, but what could they have done? What can anyone do? And that question itself reveals how deeply we've accepted helplessness as a virtue. As if the only 2 options are to do nothing or to single-handedly solve systemic ableism before breakfast. As if there's no middle ground between apathy and martyrdom. They could have stopped. They could have asked if Robert needed help. They could have offered to call another car. They could have spoken up to the driver even just to say, "This isn't right." They could have picked up that pill bottle before it rolled into the drain. They could have simply stood with him so he wasn't alone in his humiliation. Small acts. Simple acts. Acts that cost nothing but require everything we seem unwilling to give. Attention, time, the willingness to be briefly inconvenienced by someone else's suffering. But here's what really happened, what always happens in these moments. People calculated the cost of involvement against the benefit of ignorance, and ignorance won. Because getting involved might make them late. Because speaking up might create conflict. Because helping might obligate them to care beyond this single moment, and caring is exhausting in a world that demands we reserve our energy for ourselves. So Robert stood alone. And that aloneness is on all of us. Not just the driver who abandoned him. Not just the witnesses who looked away. All of us who have built a society where a man with a prosthetic leg has to apologize for existing in public space. All of us who have normalized the idea that efficiency matters more than humanity. All of us who scroll past stories like this one, feel a brief pang of something that might be empathy, and then move on without changing anything about how we move through the world. This isn't ancient history. This isn't happening in some far-off place. This is Tuesday morning. This is a major city. This is the world we've collectively created through a million small choices to look away, to stay silent, to prioritize our comfort over someone else's dignity. And the worst part? Right now, somewhere this is happening again. Someone is being discarded because their body doesn't cooperate with someone else's schedule. Someone is standing alone, humiliated, wondering why the social contract they believed in doesn't seem to include them. Someone is learning, once again, that their membership in the human community is conditional, provisional, revocable at someone else's whim. So when you finish reading this, when you go back to your day, ask yourself, what will you do the next time you see someone struggling? Will you be the person who turns away, who finds a reason why it's not your problem, why you can't get involved? Or will you be the person who stops, who sees, who acts? Because here's the truth that should terrify all of us. Any one of us could be Robert tomorrow. A car accident, a medical diagnosis, a random Tuesday when your body decides it's had enough. Disability doesn't discriminate. Age doesn't spare anyone. The only difference between you and Robert is time and luck, both of which run out for everyone eventually. When that day comes for you, and statistically, it will come, what kind of world do you want to be standing in? One where strangers leave you alone on a curb? Or one where someone stops, looks you in the eye and says, I see you. You matter. How can I help? The choice is ours. Every single day. Every single moment. What will you choose? The morning had shifted. It was subtle at first, the kind of change that happens at the edges of perception before the conscious mind registers it. The sun, which had been climbing steadily toward its zenith, now passed behind a cloud. Not a dark storm cloud that promised rain, but one of those vast, gossamer formations that filtered the light rather than blocked it entirely. The honey-colored glow that had bathed the street transformed into something softer, diffused, almost silver. Shadows that had been sharp and defined now blurred at their edges, and the temperature dropped by perhaps 2 degrees, enough to raise goosebumps on exposed skin. The wind, which had been barely present, just the faintest stirring of air that occasionally lifted a strand of hair or rustled a leaf, began to pick up. It came from the east, carrying with it the smell of the river 3 blocks away, that particular urban waterway scent of algae and old stone and the accumulated minerals of industry. It moved down Ashford Street with purposeful direction, strong enough now to send a discarded receipt skittering along the gutter, to make the American flag hanging from the building next door snap and flutter with sudden animation. Robert felt it against his face, that wind. It dried the moisture that had gathered at the corners of his eyes, moisture he wouldn't acknowledge as tears because men of his generation, from his culture, had been taught that tears were admissions of defeat. The air moved across his skin like an invisible hand, neither comforting nor cruel, simply present in a way that reminded him he was still here, still breathing, still existing despite someone's attempt to erase him from their mourning. The sounds of the street began to change as well. The steady hum of traffic seemed to momentarily ease, as if some cosmic traffic light several blocks away had created a temporary lull in the flow of vehicles. In that brief pocket of relative quiet, other sounds emerged. The rhythmic beeping of a construction vehicle reversing somewhere out of sight. The sharp bark of a dog from an upper-floor apartment. The mechanical whir of the traffic light changing, its internal machinery audible in the temporary absence of engine noise. A siren, distant but approaching, its wail rising and falling like a mechanical warning of something coming, though whether help or simply more chaos was impossible to know. Inside the Meridian Tower, visible through those tinted glass doors, Marcus the security guard had risen from his desk. His coffee mug sat abandoned, a thin trail of steam still rising from its surface. He stood facing the bank of monitors, his posture rigid, his hand frozen halfway to his radio. On the screens before him, multiple angles showed the scene that had just unfolded. Robert struggled to exit the vehicle, the driver's aggression, the witnesses who had chosen not to see. Marcus's face, reflected faintly in the monitor glass, showed an expression caught between professional detachment and personal outrage, a man wrestling with the question of whether his job was to observe or to act. The light continued to shift. Another cloud, this one slightly darker, moved across the sun's face, and for a moment the street fell into something approaching shadow. The windows of the Meridian, which had been reflecting the sky, now became almost transparent, revealing the lobby within with sudden clarity. The marble floor. The modern furniture arranged in precise groupings. The abstract sculpture near the elevator banks. And Marcus, still standing, still watching, his hand now moving definitively toward the radio clip to his belt. Robert had taken one step forward, testing his ability to walk, to move toward that distant bus stop and whatever remained of his day. His cane struck the pavement with its soft rubber tap, and the sound seemed to echo more than it had before, as if the changed atmosphere carried it differently. His prosthetic leg swung forward with its mechanical precision, and he shifted his weight, prepared to take another step into his uncertain future. But then came the sound that changed everything. It was a door opening, the heavy glass entrance to the Meridian Tower. The pneumatic hinges released with a distinctive hiss, followed by that particular resonance of commercial-grade glass in motion. The sound was innocuous enough, probably happened dozens of times every day, but in this moment, in this newly shifted atmosphere, it seemed to carry weight beyond its mechanical origin. Footsteps followed. Not the hurried clip of someone late for work. Not the casual shuffle of someone checking their mail. These were deliberate steps, boots against marble, moving with purpose from the interior of the building toward the exterior door. Heavy steps. Measured steps. The kind of footfall that suggested someone large, someone solid, someone who moved through the world with the confidence of knowing their physical presence commanded attention. The second door opened. More glass. More pneumatic hissing. And now the footsteps transitioned from marble to concrete, from interior to exterior, from the controlled environment of the lobby to the uncertain space of the street. Robert heard it. His body, trained by years of vigilance that comes from being vulnerable in public spaces, registered the sound and calculated threat level automatically. He began to turn, slowly, his balance shifting, his cane planted firmly to support the rotation. His face, which had been set in grim determination to simply move forward and forget this morning had happened, now showed something else. A flicker of wariness, of uncertainty about what new challenge was approaching from behind. The wind gusted again, stronger this time, and carried with it something new. Not the river smell now, but something else. The faint scent of clean cotton and leather. The smell of someone who had just come from inside, from climate-controlled air, carrying that particular freshness of indoor space meeting outdoor atmosphere. The footsteps continued. Closer now. Deliberate. Unhurried but unstoppable. The sound of someone who had made a decision and was now executing it with complete commitment. And in that moment, in that space between Robert's beginning to turn and whatever was approaching from behind, the morning held its breath once more. The wind paused. The distant traffic seemed to fade even further. Even the flag stopped its snapping and hung limp against its pole. The city itself seemed to be waiting, watching, wondering what would happen next on this ordinary Tuesday that had already proven to be anything but ordinary. The man who emerged fully into the morning light was not what anyone would have expected. He stood perhaps 6 feet 4 inches tall, his frame filling the doorway of the Meridian Tower in a way that seemed almost architectural, as if he were part of the building's structure rather than a mere occupant passing through it. His shoulders were broad in a way that suggested not vanity-driven gym sculpting but functional strength, the kind built through years of actual physical work, lifting, carrying, building. His skin was a deep brown that caught the filtered sunlight and seemed to hold it, radiating a warmth that contrasted with the cooling morning air. He wore what could only be described as working clothes elevated to intentional style. Dark blue work pants, the kind with reinforced knees and multiple pockets designed for tools rather than fashion, but clean and well-fitted. A black t-shirt that stretched across his chest and arms, revealing muscular definition that spoke of someone who used his body as an instrument of purpose rather than display. Over this, a worn leather jacket, brown and softened by age and wear, the kind of garment that becomes more distinguished with every season it survives. On his feet, steel-toed boots that had seen miles of pavement and floors but were still carefully maintained, the leather oiled, the laces intact and properly tied. But it was his face that truly arrested attention. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with a strong jawline partially covered by a closely trimmed beard that was beginning to show threads of gray at the chin. His eyes, dark and extraordinarily focused, carried the kind of intensity that suggested someone who noticed everything, who processed information constantly, who missed nothing in his environment. There were lines at the corners of those eyes, not from age but from laughter, from squinting into sunlight, from years of expression that suggested this was a man who felt things deeply and didn't hide it. Around his neck hung a simple silver chain, and from it dangled a small medallion that caught the light as he moved. Saint Christopher, the patron saint of travelers, worn thin from decades of being touched, worried between fingers during moments of stress or contemplation. His hands, which now hung loosely at his sides as he walked, were large and scarred in the way that working hands always are, small white lines across the knuckles, calluses at the base of each finger, the permanent marks of someone who built things, fixed things, created with his hands. His name was James Crawford, though most people called him Crawford or simply JC. He was a union carpenter who had lived in the Meridian for 3 years, occupying a modest one-bedroom on the 8th floor that overlooked the courtyard rather than the street. He had been in the lobby collecting his mail when the scene outside had begun to unfold, and he had watched it on the security monitors while Marcus narrated the events in real time with barely contained anger. Now, as he moved toward Robert with those deliberate, measured steps, his face held an expression that was difficult to read. Not quite anger, not quite compassion, but something that contained elements of both and added something else entirely. Determination. Purpose. The look of someone who had decided something needed to be done and was going to do it. Robert completed his turn, his body finally rotated enough to see who was approaching. Their eyes met across the distance of perhaps 15 feet. The older Asian man with his cane and his carefully pressed shirt and his missing leg, and this imposing figure in work clothes and boots who was moving toward him with unmistakable intention. For a moment, Robert's face showed fear. In his experience, when large men approached with purpose, it rarely ended well for someone in his position. His grip tightened on his cane, not as a weapon, it would be useless as such, but as a talisman, something to hold on to while bracing for whatever came next. But then Crawford did something unexpected. As he closed the distance between them, his face transformed. The intensity softened without disappearing entirely, and a smile emerged, not a broad, performative grin, but something gentler, more genuine. A smile that reached his eyes and created those laugh lines more prominently. A smile that said without words, "I see you. You're safe. I'm here to help." He slowed his approach as he got closer, his body language shifting from purposeful advance to careful approach, the way someone might move toward a wounded animal they wanted to help but not startle. His hands came up slightly, palms visible, the universal gesture of peaceful intention. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly soft given his size, a deep baritone that carried warmth and something that sounded almost like apology. "Sir," he said, and that single word carried more respect than Robert had received all morning. "My name is James Crawford. I live in this building. I saw what happened." He paused, letting that sink in, letting Robert understand that he had been witnessed, that his humiliation had not gone entirely unnoticed. "That was wrong. What that driver did to you was wrong." Crawford took another step closer, now within conversational distance, close enough that Robert could see the genuine concern in his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw that suggested controlled anger, not at Robert but at the situation, at the driver, at the injustice of it all. "I'm guessing you had somewhere important to be," Crawford continued, his tone conversational but focused entirely on Robert with an attention that felt like being seen for the first time that morning. "And I'm guessing that driver just screwed up your whole day." He glanced down the street in the direction the silver sedan had disappeared, and something dark flickered across his face, a flash of the intensity that had been there when he first emerged from the building. Then his attention returned fully to Robert, and the warmth returned with it. "I've got my truck parked in the garage downstairs," he said, gesturing with his thumb back toward the Meridian. "It's a Tuesday morning. I've got nowhere to be for another hour. How about I give you a ride to wherever you were trying to go?" The offer hung in the air between them, simple and direct. No pity. No performative heroism. Just one human being seeing another human being in need and offering the most practical solution possible. Crawford stood there, patient, his entire body language open and non-threatening, waiting for Robert's response. Behind him, visible through the glass doors of the Meridian, Marcus the security guard watched the monitors with his hand still on his radio, ready to intervene if needed but recognizing that what was unfolding now was something different from what had come before. The wind picked up again, swirling around both men, carrying away some of the heaviness that had settled over the morning. The sun broke through the clouds once more, and for a moment, Crawford seemed almost to glow in the restored light. This large man in work clothes and boots who had decided that someone else's problem was his problem too, that someone else's dignity was worth protecting, that a Tuesday morning could still be salvaged despite its terrible beginning. And Robert, looking up at this unexpected savior, felt something shift inside his chest. Not quite hope. He'd been disappointed too many times for hope to arrive easily, but something adjacent to it. The possibility that perhaps he wasn't as alone as he believed. Block 7. The confrontation and protection. Robert's mouth opened, then closed. Words seemed inadequate for the moment, caught somewhere between his throat and his tongue, weighted down by the morning's accumulated humiliation and this sudden, unexpected reversal. His eyes, which had been holding back moisture through sheer force of will, now threatened to betray him for entirely different reasons. He swallowed hard, the action visible in the movement of his Adam's apple, and managed to speak in a voice that was rougher than he intended. You don't have to do that," he said, and even as the words left his mouth, he recognized them for what they were, not refusal but testing, the careful probe of someone who had learned to be suspicious of kindness because it so often came with conditions attached. Crawford's smile didn't waver. If anything, it deepened slightly, carrying with it a knowing quality that suggested he understood exactly what Robert was doing and why. "I know I don't have to," he said simply, "but I'm going to anyway if you'll let me." He shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that somehow made him seem less imposing, more approachable. "What's your name, sir?" "Robert Chin." The words came automatically, decades of social conditioning overriding the confusion and exhaustion that clouded his mind. "Mr. Chin," Crawford said, and the formality of it, the respect embedded in that simple honorific, nearly undid Robert completely. "Where were you headed before that driver decided to act like an ass?" Despite everything, Robert felt a small, unexpected laugh escape him. More of a breath than actual laughter, but real nonetheless. "The Riverside Medical Center. Physical therapy appointment." "I'm already late." Crawford pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, glanced at the screen. "It's 9:43. What time was your appointment?" "9:30. So you're 13 minutes late. Not the end of the world." Crawford was already moving, not away but beside Robert, his presence solid and reassuring. "Medical center's what, 15 minutes from here? 20 with traffic? We can call from the truck, let them know you're running late, ask them to work you in. Physical therapists are usually pretty understanding about this kind of thing." He noticed the pill bottle then, still sitting by the storm drain, and before Robert could say anything, Crawford had moved toward it with surprising grace for someone his size. He bent at the knees rather than the waist, the movement of someone who knew how to lift properly, who respected his body's mechanics, and retrieved the bottle. He examined the label briefly, not reading the details but noting its importance, then walked back and held it out to Robert. "This yours?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. Robert took it with a trembling hand, his fingers brushing Crawford's briefly in the exchange. "Thank you," he whispered, and those two words carried the weight of the entire morning, all the fear and humiliation and loneliness compressed into a single expression of gratitude. "Don't thank me yet," Crawford said with a slight smile. "You haven't seen my driving." He gestured toward the building. "Truck's this way. You okay to walk, or would you like me to bring it around front?" It was such a simple question, asked without judgment, without impatience. Just a practical inquiry about what Robert needed, leaving the decision entirely in his hands. Robert felt something in his chest, that thing that had been clenched tight since the silver sedan had pulled away, begin to loosen slightly. "I can walk," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Something about Crawford's presence, his solidity, his complete lack of pity or performative concern, made the distance to the parking garage seem manageable rather than insurmountable. They had taken perhaps 3 steps together, Crawford matching his pace to Robert's careful, measured gait without making it obvious he was doing so, when the sound of an engine made them both turn. The silver sedan was coming back down the street. The driver had apparently realized he'd left without properly canceling the ride through the app, or had thought of something else to say, some additional insult to deliver or justification to offer. The car pulled up to the curb again and the driver's window rolled down. The man leaned out, sunglasses still hiding his eyes, but his face showed irritation rather than remorse. "Hey," he called out, his voice carrying that same edge of aggression that had colored every interaction. "You need to cancel this ride on your end. I'm getting charged. Wait time." Robert's entire body tensed. Crawford felt it, noticed how Robert's grip on his cane tightened, how his shoulders drew up toward his ears in an unconscious protective gesture. And something in Crawford's expression changed. The warmth remained, but beneath it, something harder emerged. Something that had been there all along but had been carefully controlled, kept in check. Now it surfaced like a submarine rising from deep water, slow and inevitable. Crawford turned fully toward the sedan, and the movement had weight to it. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply walked the few steps that separated them from the curb with the same measured, purposeful stride he'd used when first approaching Robert. When he reached the car, he placed one large hand on the roof, leaning down slightly to bring his face level with the driver's window. His voice, when he spoke, was still soft, still controlled, but it carried an undercurrent of steel that hadn't been there before. "You charged him for a ride you didn't provide," Crawford said, each word precisely articulated. "You verbally abused him. You threw his belongings on the ground. And now you want him to do you a favor?" He paused, letting that sink in, his dark eyes locked on the driver despite the sunglasses that prevented true eye contact. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to refund his money. All of it. You're going to cancel this ride on your end and mark it as driver canceled, not passenger. And then you're going to drive away and never, ever accept another ride request from Mr. Chen. Are we clear?" The driver's jaw tightened. "You can't tell me what to do. This is between me and him. Who the hell are you anyway?" "I'm someone who watched you treat a human being like garbage," Crawford said, and his voice dropped even lower, became even more controlled, which somehow made it more menacing than if he'd shouted. "I'm someone who has your license plate number, your name from your placard, and about 6 different camera angles of you committing what could arguably be called disability discrimination." He gestured toward the Meridian's entrance, where those 3 security cameras hung in their silent vigil. "I'm also someone who's got a lot of free time and a real strong sense of what's right and wrong." The driver's face had gone slightly pale beneath his tan. His hand, visible through the window, gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to." "You're right," Crawford interrupted, his tone almost conversational now. "You don't have to do anything. You could drive away right now. But I promise you, if you do, I will make it my personal mission to ensure that every rideshare company in this city knows exactly what kind of driver you are. I will file complaints. I will submit video evidence. I will call your supervisor daily. I will become the biggest inconvenience of your professional life." He paused, let that sink in. "Or you could just do the right thing, which takes about 30 seconds, and then we never have to see each other again." The silence stretched between them, tension crackling in the air like static electricity before a storm. Robert, standing several feet away, watched with an expression that mixed disbelief with something approaching awe. This stranger, this man he'd never met before today, was fighting a battle on his behalf with a calm, controlled fury that demanded justice rather than simply offering pity. Finally, the driver's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Fine," he muttered, pulling his phone from its dashboard mount and stabbing at the screen with angry, jerky movements. "There. Refunded. Cancel. Happy?" "Not particularly," Crawford said, straightening up to his full height. "But it's a start." He stepped back from the car, his hand leaving the roof, creating space for the driver to leave. "You should think about finding a different line of work. One that doesn't involve interacting with people. Maybe something in waste management would suit you." The driver's face flushed red with anger, but he didn't respond. He simply rolled up his window with perhaps more force than necessary and pulled away from the curb, the sedan's tires chirping slightly against the pavement as he accelerated harder than needed. Within seconds, the car had disappeared around the corner, leaving behind only the faint smell of burned rubber and the memory of its driver's cowardice. Crawford watched until the vehicle was completely out of sight, then turned back to Robert with a slight shake of his head. "Sorry about that," he said, as if he had been the one to cause inconvenience rather than resolve it. "Some people need things spelled out for them." Robert was staring at him with an expression that was difficult to name. It wasn't quite gratitude, it was bigger than that, more complex. It was the look of someone who had forgotten that strangers could be kind, that the world could contain people who would stand up for you without expecting anything in return, that dignity could be restored by someone simply deciding it mattered. "You didn't have to do that," Robert said again, but this time the words carried different weight. Not testing now, but genuine wonder. Crawford shrugged, a gesture that seemed to encompass his entire frame. "Yeah, I did," he said simply. "Come on. Let's get you to your appointment." He offered his arm, not in a way that assumed Robert needed it, but in a way that suggested it was available if Robert wanted it. And after a moment's hesitation, Robert reached out and took it, his hand resting lightly on Crawford's forearm, using it more for psychological support than physical. though Crawford's solid presence made the walk toward the parking garage entrance suddenly feel less daunting than it had before. They moved together toward the building, two men from different worlds who had found themselves connected by a moment of injustice and the decision to not let it stand unanswered. Behind them, the street slowly returned to its Tuesday morning routine, but something had changed in the air, something subtle but significant, as if the morning itself had witnessed something worth remembering. The parking garage beneath the Meridian Tower was a study in utilitarian design. Concrete pillars painted industrial yellow, LED lights casting harsh white illumination that eliminated shadows but offered no warmth, the faint smell of motor oil and tire rubber mixing with the dampness that always seemed to accumulate in underground spaces. Their footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, Robert's cane adding its rhythmic tap to the percussion of Crawford's boots against the sealed concrete floor. Crawford's truck sat in a spot marked 8C, positioned near the elevator for convenience. It was a Ford F-150, dark blue and perhaps 10 years old, with the kind of honest wear that comes from actual use rather than neglect. The paint was faded slightly on the hood where sun had bleached it over countless workdays spent on job sites. The bed showed scratches and small dents from hauling materials, and there were remnants of sawdust in the corners that no amount of cleaning could entirely eliminate. But the tires were good, the windows clean, and the entire vehicle radiated the same functional reliability that Crawford himself embodied. He unlocked it with a key fob that chirped twice in the enclosed space, the sound bouncing off concrete walls. Then he moved to the passenger side and opened the door, not making a show of it but simply facilitating Robert's entry. The truck sat higher than a standard sedan, and Crawford noticed Robert assessing the distance between ground and seat, calculating the physical puzzle of entry. "There's a grab handle above the door," Crawford said, pointing to the metal bar attached to the truck's frame. "And the running board's solid. Take your time." Robert approached the challenge with the same careful deliberation he'd shown exiting the sedan earlier, but this time there was no impatient voice rushing him, no hostile presence making his body's limitations feel like a moral failing. Crawford simply stood nearby, not hovering but available, his presence offering security without stealing autonomy. Robert gripped the handle, used his cane for initial leverage, and managed to pull himself up into the seat with less difficulty than he'd anticipated. Crawford closed the door with a solid thunk that spoke to the truck's build quality, then walked around to the driver's side and climbed in. The interior was clean but lived in. A thermos in the cup holder. A worn baseball cap on the dashboard, Cubs logo faded but still visible. A St. Christopher medal identical to the one around Crawford's neck hung from the rearview mirror, spinning slowly in the air conditioning vent's breeze. The seats were cloth rather than leather, comfortable and practical. "Seatbelt," Crawford reminded gently as he started the engine, which turned over with a healthy rumble. While Robert clicked his belt into place, Crawford pulled his phone from his pocket and handed it to him. "Why don't you call the medical center? Let them know you're running late but on your way. Tell them what happened. I've found that when you tell the truth about situations like this, people are usually pretty understanding." Robert took the phone, his hand trembling slightly, and stared at it for a moment as if it were some alien technology. When was the last time a stranger had handed him their phone with such casual trust? He dialed the number he knew by heart, pressed the device to his ear, and waited through 3 rings before a receptionist answered. "Riverside Medical Center, Physical Therapy Department." "Hello, yes, this is Robert Chin. I had a 9:30 appointment with Dr. Martinez. I'm running late. There was an incident with my transportation but I'm on my way now. Is there any possibility she could still see me?" There was a pause, the sound of keyboard clicks, pages being consulted. "Mr. Chin, let me check with Dr. Martinez. Can you hold for just a moment?" "Yes, of course." Crawford was backing the truck out of its space with practiced ease, using only his side mirrors, the vehicle responding to his touch as if it were an extension of his own body. He navigated the tight corners of the parking garage with the confidence of someone who'd made this journey countless times, and within a minute they were emerging into daylight, the truck climbing the exit ramp and turning onto the street. The receptionist came back on the line. "Mr. Chin? Dr. Martinez says she can squeeze you in at 10:15 if you can be here by then. She has a cancellation that opened up and she specifically asked me to tell you not to worry, that she understands these things happen." Robert's eyes closed briefly, relief washing over his features. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll be there." He ended the call and handed the phone back to Crawford. 10:15, he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "She's going to work me in." "There you go," Crawford said, his tone carrying satisfaction. "Crisis averted." He glanced at the dashboard clock, 9:51. We've got plenty of time. Might even stop for coffee if you want." They drove in silence for a few blocks, Crawford navigating the morning traffic with patient competence, Robert watching the city pass by the window with an expression that suggested he was seeing it differently than he had earlier that morning. The streets were the same, the buildings unchanged, but something in his relationship to it all had shifted, as if he'd remembered he was allowed to occupy this space, that his presence here was legitimate rather than provisional. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said suddenly, his voice breaking the comfortable quiet. "Of course. Why did you help me? You don't know me. You could have just kept walking like everyone else did." Crawford was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of memory, of experience that had shaped him into the person he'd become. "About 15 years ago," he began, "my father had a stroke. He was a proud man, worked construction his whole life, never asked anyone for anything. After the stroke he couldn't walk right. Had to use a walker. Speech was slurred. He hated it, hated feeling dependent, hated how people looked at him." Crawford paused at a red light, his jaw working slightly as if the words were difficult to find. "One day he called me from a grocery store. He was crying, which I'd never heard before in my life. Some asshole had made a comment about him blocking the aisle, told him he should shop online if he couldn't move faster. Just treated him like he was trash because his body didn't work the way it used to." The light turned green. Crawford accelerated smoothly, his eyes still focused ahead but clearly seeing something else, some other time and place. "I got there as fast as I could, but the damage was done. My father stopped going out after that. Stopped trying. He died 6 months later, and I know, that part of what killed him was feeling like he didn't belong in the world anymore, like his body had made him less than human in other people's eyes." Crawford's voice had gone rough, and he cleared his throat. "So when I see someone being treated the way that driver treated you, I think about my father. And I think about the person I wish had been there that day in the grocery store. Someone who would have stood up, who would have said, 'This isn't right.'" Robert was quiet, absorbing this. "I'm sorry about your father," he said finally. "There are moments in life that define us not by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond to what happens around us." Robert Chen's Tuesday morning began with cruelty and indifference, with the casual violence of someone deciding that another person's humanity was negotiable, that efficiency mattered more than dignity, that 30 seconds of inconvenience justified abandonment. It could have ended there, with Robert standing alone on that sidewalk, one more invisible casualty of a society that has learned to look away from suffering that doesn't directly affect us. But it didn't end there, because James Crawford made a different choice. He could have stayed in that lobby, shaking his head at the injustice while remaining safely behind glass and concrete. He could have told himself it wasn't his problem, that someone else would help, that he was already running late for his own obligations. He could have done what the woman with the stroller did, what the man with the hose did, what countless pedestrians did, acknowledged the wrongness of the situation and then continued with his day, his conscience briefly troubled but ultimately undisturbed. Instead, he walked through those doors. He approached a stranger. He offered not pity but partnership, not charity but dignity. He confronted the person who had caused harm and demanded accountability. He gave his time, his truck, his phone, and ultimately a piece of himself in the form of that business card, a standing offer of future help, a promise that Robert would never have to face that kind of cruelty alone again. This is what heroism actually looks like. Not capes and superpowers, not grand gestures captured for social media, not the performance of goodness for an audience. Just a man in work boots and a leather jacket who decided that another human being's struggle was worth his attention, his time, his intervention. Just someone who remembered his own pain, his own loss, and chose to transform that grief into action rather than bitterness. The story of Robert and Crawford is extraordinary only because we've allowed ourselves to believe that such actions are rare, that such people are exceptions. We've normalized a world where witnesses to injustice remain silent, where bystanders prioritize their comfort over someone else's crisis, where the social contract has been rewritten to absolve us of responsibility for anyone beyond our immediate circle. We've told ourselves that we're powerless, that individual action doesn't matter, that the problems are too big and we are too small. But Crawford proved something different. He proved that one person can change the trajectory of someone's entire day, maybe even their life. He proved that standing up doesn't require special training or superhuman courage, just the decision that someone else's dignity matters as much as your own convenience. He proved that the smallest acts of intervention can ripple outward in ways we can never fully measure. Think about what happened after Crawford drove away. Robert went to his physical therapy appointment, But he went with something he hadn't had earlier that morning: hope. The belief that not everyone would treat him as disposable. The knowledge that kindness still existed, that strangers could become protectors, that his disability didn't make him less deserving of respect. How much did that change his willingness to continue fighting, to keep showing up, to keep believing that life was worth living fully despite its challenges? And Crawford himself, how did that act change him? How did choosing to be the person he wished had existed for his father help heal some part of his grief? How did transforming his pain into purpose give new meaning to his father's suffering? The gift of helping someone isn't just received by the person being helped. It's received by the helper too, in the form of purpose, connection, and the confirmation that we are the people we hope we are. This morning, somewhere in your city, there's another Robert standing on another sidewalk, facing another moment of cruelty or indifference. There's someone struggling to get out of a car, to climb a set of stairs, to navigate a world not built for their body. There's someone being told through action or inaction that they don't matter, that their needs are inconvenient, that their presence is an imposition. And there's you. You who have now heard this story. You who have witnessed what one person's decision to act can accomplish. You who can no longer claim ignorance about what's possible, about what's needed, about who you have the power to become in someone else's darkest moment. The woman with the stroller could have stopped. The man with the hose could have spoken up. The pedestrians could have paused. They didn't, and Robert suffered for it. But then Crawford did stop, did speak up, did pause his own life to make room for someone else's crisis. And everything changed. You have that same power. You have the ability to be the person who stops, who sees, who acts. You have the capacity to transform someone's terrible day into a bearable one, maybe even a good one. You have the choice, every single day, multiple times a day, to be Crawford or to be everyone else. The question isn't whether you'll encounter opportunities to help. You will. The question is, when that moment comes, when you see someone struggling, when you witness injustice, when you could intervene but it would be easier not to, what will you do? Will you look away and tell yourself it's not your problem? Will you feel a moment of discomfort and then continue with your important day? Will you add yourself to the long list of witnesses who saw suffering and chose silence? Or will you be the person who walks through the doors, who approaches the stranger, who says, "I see you. What you're experiencing is wrong. How can I help?" Because here's the truth that should keep you awake at night. Robert needed someone that morning and Crawford showed up. But there are thousands of Roberts, every single day, and most of them don't get a Crawford. Most of them stand alone. Most of them learn again and again that their struggle is theirs alone to bear, that the world has decided they don't matter enough to pause for. You can change that. One moment, one person, one decision to care more about someone else's dignity than your own convenience. The cards in Crawford's wallet, the business card he gave to Robert, that's not just contact information. That's a promise. That's a declaration that someone exists in this world who believes Robert deserves help, who values his dignity, who refuses to let him face cruelty alone. How many people in your life have that card? How many people know that if they call, you'll come? More importantly, how many people need that card from you and don't have it yet? This story is true. It happened on a Tuesday morning on a street corner that could be anywhere. Robert is real. Crawford is real. The driver who abandoned Robert is real. The witnesses who looked away are real. And the choice they all made, to help or to ignore, to intervene or to walk on, that choice is real too. It's the same choice you'll face, probably soon, maybe today. So here's the final question, the one that matters more than any other. When your moment comes, and it will come, what kind of person will you choose to be?